like to do in the next maybe half an hour or so is to really give you a really different perspective. It's not really motivational, nor is it inspirational, but because I was given a privilege to be a part of MES Fair team, the STAR team, and through the months of work together with our teammates who are sitting here amongst you, we did manage to get a lot of insights about what is happening today, what is the thinking of MES, what is the future likely to be, and what are some of the things that you could be doing between now and the time maybe MES Fair is being announced. Would that be okay? All right, so it will be very important to you. So can you just wave your booklet at me and something like that, and pen? All right, and if you have a pen, can you just wave it at me? And the purpose of the pen is to poke the person next to you in case he falls asleep. So let's go on to the presentation itself. All right, what I'm about to share with you really is several perspectives. And it goes like this. The very first part of this presentation is really about what are some of the lessons that we are learning from the MES Fair. And ultimately, I will tell you that the one great thing that MES Fair has done for this industry is what I call to awaken a sleeping giant. And I'll tell you who this giant is. The second thing I would like to do is to be able to share with you how the future of the financial services industry in Singapore may look like. It may be a bit of a guesswork, but I think we are not going to be pretty much wrong in saying the things that we are saying, but to give you a little bit of a glimpse based on some of the changes that are already happening right under our noses. And here, we're going to really talk about the shape of things to come. The third thing I'd like to share with you about is, in spite of all that we are seeing, in spite of MES Fair, in spite of all the changes that you're seeing all around you, why it is still possible and that you should be optimistic about this industry, because there is great hope. Turn to your neighbor and say, there is great hope. Okay, but not just hope in itself, but if you take action upon that hope, as Jason would share, we are really going to get somewhere, okay? So we are in a great industry. And then I'm going to just talk about it in terms of how you can prepare to thrive. My background is that I have been 20 plus years in this business. I've been involved in the association work through MES Fair, and I've had the privilege of training many different financial consultants, advisors, and all that in banks, financial institutions, all across around the region. So I have been able to assemble some of the thoughts which I'd like to share with you this morning. Let's very quickly take a look at some of the lessons that we can draw from MES Fair. I'd like to give a bit of a background here and to give you a bit of a picture of how it actually looked like when we started the assembling of the people to get involved with engaging MES Fair. It looks something like this, and I'd like to draw the analogy here. And it goes like this. On December the 7th, 1941, on a Sunday morning, everything on this Pacific island in Hawaii, called Oahu, everything looked very normal. They knew that there was a war going on in Europe. Everything was normal. Everybody was having a good time. They were sitting on their deck chairs by the beach. They were having a great time. Everything looked very safe. Everyone felt very protected. Why? Because it was a military base that they were staying in. They were staying in a naval base called Pearl Harbor. How many of you are familiar with Pearl Harbor? Can I see a show of hands? Many of us here are very familiar with Pearl Harbor. If you were one of the people in those days in 1941, on that December 7th, a few hours before the next thing happened, you would never have imagined what would have happened next. And what happened next is exactly what you're seeing right here in this next picture. The Japanese launched a surprise attack. There were several warnings, but nobody took heed. Everybody wanted to think that it was life per normal, life as per normal. But the Japanese came and they created such devastation that altogether 8 battleships on that day were either destroyed or they were badly damaged. 350 aircraft were either destroyed or they were badly damaged. And most unfortunately, nearly 30 or 3,000 people died that day, including soldiers and civilians. This was the devastation. Now, the person who led the attack on Pearl Harbor was an admiral, imperial admiral by the name of Isoroku Yamamoto. And he was reputed to have said this, that I'm afraid all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant. And these words were recorded on the movie Tora, Tora, Tora. How many of you have seen that movie? Tora, Tora, Tora. Okay, you probably be about 50 years old and above. Okay, that's a bit of a giveaway. And indeed, they did wake up a sleeping giant. The U.S. on the 6th and the 9th of August of 1945, 4 years later, or 3.5 years later, dropped 2 bombs, one on Hiroshima and one on Nagasaki. Interestingly, the 2 bombs were known as Little Boy and Fat Man. Interesting. But it created so much devastation, a lot of people died, and the country of Japan was never the same again. There is a very powerful lesson here. It was not just about people being unprepared for war or how people reacted to war, but that in a war situation, when 2 sides are aggressive, nobody wins. When 2 sides try to bring down the other side, nobody wins. Turn to your neighbor and say, nobody wins in war. Can you do that? Turn to your neighbor and say, nobody wins in war. And it's very unfortunate. Now, I want you to fast forward your watch and your calendar and go with me to Monday, 26 March, 2012. What happened at the Raffles Convention Center? There were people who were gathered for a celebration called the 50th anniversary of the Life Insurance Association. CEOs, directors, people who mattered in the insurance industry got together to celebrate the 50th anniversary, which interestingly 50 means the year of Jubilee, the year of freedom. But on that day, there was a surprise, an unpleasant surprise for the people sitting there. And if you and I were sitting there, we would have choked. We would have choked on our shark fins. We would have choked because we were caught unaware. All of us wanted to think that it was business as usual. If there were going to be announcements, it would be pretty moderate. But it was not to be that way. There were one announcement after another announcement which took the industry by storm. It caught us unaware, and that was when we got this. It could have been anybody who would have said this, but somebody would have said that all that was done was to awaken a sleeping giant. Turn to your neighbor and say, you are that sleeping giant. Can you do that? Turn to your neighbor and say, you are that sleeping giant. And that was exactly what happened. Who is this sleeping giant? And I want to congratulate you for that. And I'm sure all the people in FPAS and the FPAS Alliance, the STAR team, want to congratulate you for that, because indeed, this is the sleeping giant. FPAS, FISMA, AIA, Prudential, Great Eastern, AXA, Manulife, HSBC, IPP, all got together and they formed an alliance called the IFPAS Alliance, representing about 13,000 financial consultants in our industry. Let's give yourself a hand. It is really something to be proud of, because never in the history of our industry has so many insurance companies come together, have so many financial consultants raise their hands and say, I want to get involved, but this is the sleeping giant. And because of this, we form what you will call the IFPAS Alliance. I'm sure many of you here would have heard of that. But just to make the point clear, the IFPAS Alliance was actually an assembly of insurance companies, associations representing people like yourself and myself, representing financial consultants, representing managers. They got together and they decided that they had to take action. It was not just a hope, they had to take action. And did they take action? In fact, the action was swift, the action was strong, the action was almost, if you like, sudden, because they were able to do surveys that even survey companies were shocked about. We were able to get things like getting a survey done in 1 week or 2 weeks, and to assemble this survey and present it into a report in that kind of time frame. Give yourself a hand for participating in those things. It is amazing. Turn to your neighbor and say, you are amazing. Really, because the thing that the industry did was unprecedented. Unprecedented. But at the same time, the industry has never come under as great a threat, if you like, as this moment. Through the IFPAS Alliance was birthed a team of people. If you like, you can call them SWAT team or whatever you want to call them, but they were called the STAR team. And it was a 7-member team which included people who had many years in the industry. I had the privilege of working with these people, and can you imagine going into a meeting with people with a total about 200 years of experience and none of them would stop talking? It is amazing, okay? The ideas that came in actually gave me so much hope that this industry is actually one that is marked by people who are committed, passionate, brilliant, and people who are willing to serve. Let's give the STAR team a round of applause. This group of people came together and they put in many man-hours of meeting, calls overseas, engaging people in the MAS side, the FAIR panel, hours and hours of discussion, PowerPoints, reports by the thousands of dollars assembled thanks to the sponsorship of the IFPAS Alliance. And they came together and presented a paper and a presentation to MAS that almost shocked them. Well, I won't say almost shocked them. It shocked them. And they began to realize that we are not from the second-hand car dealer industry, where you can have rules and regulations without consultation. We have done pretty well. By the grace of God, we have done pretty well in that we have not been subservient to rules and regulations, because those that were proposed would have absolutely not just destroyed this industry, but destroyed the financial wellness of every Singaporean. So, the presentation was made, consultation paper today is out, and those things that were originally proposed have either been stalled, deferred, or muted. It was through this whole experience, like I say, like a surprise attack that the Japanese had on Pearl Harbor. The question here is, when you respond, how do you respond? And I would dare say that the industry responded, even though there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of uncertainty, and yet